The Windham Werewolf, an Ohio Dogman story. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've been looking through your old episodes, trying to see if any of the videos were similar to the Dogman experience that happened to me back half a century ago when I was in my 20s. Ironically, the only one of yours that really brought back the vibes of that horrifying night for me was the one where you played the Dogman video game. I actually have played the game since then at a friend's house, and I have to say, it was nearly as scary as the original experience. I had been considering buying one for myself, but at my age, I don't think that would be good for my heart. The thing that got me was the way the werewolf or Dogman could be heard howling, way off in the distance in your earphones. Although it wasn't exactly the same sound that I heard in real life, it was close enough to send shivers up and down my back, and to make me take my headphones off more than once. It was all just too similar to my personal experience back in the 20th century. So how this started was my old lady kicked me out, and so I was wandering around and sleeping in the woods like a hippie for a while. I shouldn't say like a hippie, because I was a hippie. It was the early 1970s, and if there ever was a time to drop out of society, that was it. So I seized my day, and I became sort of a hobo for maybe 14 or 18 months. That was the time of life when other guys in that era were working their way up at their job, or working their way into a marriage. Me? I was letting my hair and beard grow. I was living off the wild hickory nuts, like my hero Yule Gibbons, and I was basically wandering through the Garden of Eden, as though I'd been absolved of original sin. My family used to refer to that era as the time when I lost my mind, or lost my way. But they're nuts. That was the best and most peaceful period of my life. I eventually gave up on it because, even at age 23 or 24, I was already beginning to find it too taxing to continue. Especially when winter came around. I had to spend too much time focused on survival for my life to have very much quality to it at all. I could have continued living that way, even up to recently, but I decided to cautiously work my way back into the outskirts of human culture. It was the Dogman who caused me to realize that I was not built for the forest. I had begun to think that I was evolving myself into a real forest creature, and that I might spend the rest of my life there. But then I encountered my first Dogman, and it was like the difference between Little League versus Dodger Stadium. The Dogman was made for living in the forest, but I wasn't. The only way humans can compete against creatures like the Dogman is if we band together and cooperate. Could a town of people keep themselves safe from the Dogman? Of course. Could one lone hippie keep himself safe? Now that was a harder question to answer. Ultimately, in the end, I opted to rejoin the collective, because that's my lot in life as a human. We aren't very fast, we aren't very dangerous when on our own, and we certainly aren't as intelligent as we like to imagine ourselves. I think the only reason we're even still here is because we learned to cooperate and share ideas and plans. The only thing which I believe can really wipe us out is if we decide to fight each other more than we cooperate. Because let me tell you, I learned from personal experience that you aren't going to win against nature or the Dogman if you're trying to do it on your own. Unless you're Tony Stark or Bruce Wayne, I guess, but that's not me. So I was in Windham, Ohio, which looks like a big letter C on the Google Maps. My granddaughter says it looks like the letter G, but however you see it, much of the southern part of Windham is very densely forested. What you can also see if you zoom in is that there is a military encampment in these woods. It seems to be called LRC, and it's not even blurred out from Google's satellite imagery. I'm guessing that means that its secrets, if it has any, would be underground, or at least undercover, from the cameras orbiting our planet. I never knew this before. Now, back in 1972-ish, when I was passing through over there, I had no idea about the military uses of that forest at all. In fact, I did not come upon the LRC camp during any of this. I did see a number of nondescript yet enigmatic structures, which could have really been anything. Factories, laboratories, living quarters, or just abandoned. I don't know if those were military or private or what. They didn't seem to be marked. Since I'm not from that area, I'm only learning about this now by checking Google Maps to get my story facts correct for this version I'm writing for you. I noticed that I can view the woods from above on the maps, but there are no street view possibilities. The road into the base ends at this railroad crossing on the maps, and you can see how the world beyond that looks sort of blurry. Well, that blurry world is where I was heading in real life to camp out on that night so long ago. Now, I don't recall crossing any barriers, like I didn't climb any fences or anything, and I thought I was camping out in wilderness. In fact, all these years since the incident, I never really thought about the possibility that there might have been a military base in that area. Now that I know that there is, and I can even see at least part of it on Google Maps, I have to wonder if there might also be an underground network of tunnels in that same area. The reason I bring this up is because in the last 15 or 20 years, I've heard a number of stories of dogmen appearing either at cave entrances or other openings into underground areas, both natural and artificial. It's caused me to wonder sometimes if the dogmen are a demonic species, or they might be in some way related to the military. In ancient Egypt, Anubis was guardian of the dead in the afterlife, right? Maybe this is a species which guards the passageways between our world and others. Maybe that means the surface world versus the underworld? Or maybe it means our dimension of reality versus whichever one the dogman comes from. Or maybe he's the guardian between all realities. I have to say, I never thought about any of these possibilities applying to my own sighting before, and that the presence of a military base in those same woods as my 50-year-old dogman experience certainly does change my perceptions of the original event. In fact, I think it throws every detail of my memory into open question. Did I really see what I remember seeing? And what was the actual meaning of whatever that was? So here's how it all happened. I had my sleeping bag laid out on some dry ground at the foot of a tree, and I had my stuff laid out all around me, including my alarm clock. It looked like a suburban bedroom collapsed onto the dirt. Just as I was about to fall asleep, a rustling in the bushes woke me up. Looking around, I saw eyeshine coming from the woods nearby. There was only moon and starlight out there, and yet that eyeshine in the woods was bright and unmistakable. I figured it was a deer, but it wouldn't go away, and it wouldn't stop looking at me. I don't know what I was thinking, but I really had not learned much about nature yet at that point. And so I got up and wandered over toward what I thought was a deer, holding a box of sugary breakfast cereal that I was going to offer to it. I forget if it was Quisp or Quake or Captain Crunch or what, but it was one of those sweet breakfast cereals that our mighty generation grew up on. I think I was talking baby talk to the deer, telling it that I wasn't going to hurt it, and that I had a special treat for it, and crap that I would tell my dog when I was a kid. I had never been homeless before. I had never been in nature before. My life had been pretty sheltered, up to a few months prior. So, yeah, I walked up to a wild animal, talking to it like it was my pet, and offering it refined sugar. As I got to within maybe 40 or 50 feet of the eyeshine, it began shifting around, and I stopped moving forward. Suddenly I could smell the odor of a very large animal nearby, and I felt pretty stupid to be where I was, doing what I was doing. I looked into those glowing eyes, and I saw them rise. That wasn't what I was expecting, so I gasped and started walking backward, but I never took my eyes off of those glowing orbs. They continued to rise until they were way over my head. What was I looking at? All I could make out were eyes in the darkness, but it was too dark to make out the form around the two glows. And then whatever that was made a sound which scared the living daylights out of me, even as it sounded sad at the same time. It sounded like a dog, but it was too tall to be a dog. I wondered if Sasquatches sounded like dogs because it seemed tall enough to be a Sasquatch. When I reached my camp, I grabbed my stuff and threw it in my backpack. Each time I looked behind, the eyes were still there, looking at me, but I continued to pack as calmly as my shaking hands could manage. I remember walking away and still shoving the rolled-up sleeping bag back into the knapsack as I was walking through the dark forest. I tripped more than a few times, but I was young, and the young are used to small mishaps. At least my generation was. I just kept dusting myself off and returning to my escape route. In this case, I was heading due north, not because I knew of another place I could sleep over there, but just because I had the instinctual feeling that those woods were not going to be safe for me. I heard the howling creature behind me and to my left. Turning around, I saw it for a split second. It was in movement, but it was clearly an upright figure. My mind went back to assuming that meant it was a Sasquatch, and my entire body began to tremble. Why was it following me? Why was it so interested in me? It probably did not have good intentions. I mean, this was not Harry and the Hendersons. This was real life. The only reasons I could dream up why it might be pursuing me only made me a whole heck of a lot more nervous with each succeeding second. I heard the thing, man, whatever it was, making those horrible sounding bellows behind me every so often. And I could tell that it was following me as I tried to leave. Then, to my horror, I heard one of them in front of me. Panicking, I ran sideways into the woods, trying to remember in my head which way was north. I didn't have a compass, though, and I'm pretty certain I got turned around almost immediately once I left the path. There was a howl to the front of me, so I turned right, hoping that was still the way back to town. Then there was a howl coming from that direction as well. I turned and turned and turned, each time in a different direction, but it seemed that wherever I ran, there was yet another howl coming from there as well. Exhausted, I fell into a heap between a tree and a large bush, hoping I could hide there and catch my breath. It was no secret to these creatures where I was, though, and I could hear them approaching. They were making no effort to hide their approach either, and they were easy to follow, even over my hyperventilation. When I knew I was surrounded from 5 or 6 angles, I stood up with my hands over my head. It was a weird reaction, but I felt like I was under arrest. Maybe if I gave myself up, then they might go easier on me. It was that sort of an act of desperation. So I stood there with my hands up, looking around at the forest, and also the forest. And besides the forest, there was the sky and the ground. No monsters, and no people dressed as monsters either. I felt like I was going crazy as I stood there glancing around these silent woods. There was no movement anywhere. That was the only time in my life that I was so scared, I actually started laughing. I had seen that in movies, where a person laughs when they're actually sad or angry, and it's a sign that they've lost it. So when I started laughing in that moment, I got even more frightened than before. I didn't want to become one of those people in the movies who lose their minds and start eating bugs like Renfield or Nicole Kidman. I knew I'd been followed, and I knew I was surrounded, but I still couldn't see what was doing this to me. And I wanted to scream or cry, you know? Instead, it came out as laughter. And then, very quietly, but still far from silently, something started moving in the woods directly in front. I was frozen to my spot, staring, not even able to breathe, until I could see what it was. Then, out of the woods, moving into the slightly better light, I saw a Chewbacca with a dog head. It sorta had dog feet too, but otherwise it was a Chewbacca like on the TV. As big as all that too, or even larger. I guess it was some kind of a wolf from caveman times, or maybe from the future, I'm not certain. It had a head like a wolf, but the coloring was a sort of golden brown, or at least it looked like that in the moonlight. It made that call again. And then, I could hear it echoed in almost every direction around me. I remember hearing creatures approaching me from every direction, and I think I must have fainted before I saw any of them. My next memory was waking up a few feet away from the railroad tracks, back on the north side of those tracks, the town side. I had been laying on some grass, and my backpack, and some rocks, in a weird position, so my neck and back hurt for a while afterward, like days. For decades I wondered about how I had gotten out of that situation. I had one theory that I had somehow been taken over by my subconscious, who did everything perfectly, and escaped being surrounded by all those dogmen. I just couldn't remember how I did it since it was my subconscious taking over. You know, I put a lot of thought into that theory over the decades. But while writing this, and learning that there's a military base in those woods, I'm not sure any of those old theories are even worth discussing any longer. I just took a break from writing this, and I contacted several people who still live near or have reason to visit Windham, Ohio. Now granted, this was a tiny sample size, but each of them knew about the military base there, and were stunned that I was so out of the loop on that one. I really only visited Wyndham that 1 week though, so apologize for not being an expert on the town. It turned out that 2 of my contacts had heard of dogmen or werewolf-type people being seen around those railroad tracks which mark the northern edge of the woods. Both of them talked about local theories that the creatures were brought into this reality by accident because of some experiments going on in the military area. I kind of wonder if the dogmen are there on purpose. As guard dogs, let me put it this way. If you thought that 9-foot-tall dog-headed monsters infested a forest, wouldn't you keep out of it? I mean, I never went back to that town after that night. And so maybe that was the point of what happened? On the one hand, couldn't it be possible that the military was making those wolf howl type noises themselves? And that what I saw was either a projection or maybe a disguised soldier? On the other hand, what if the dogmen are real and being used by the military to keep civilians out of their way? They might have been found underground while building the camp, assuming there actually are any underground tunnels. I wouldn't really know. The dogman could have been bred in experiments or invited through portals. Who's to say what tech the government was in possession of back then, or what they might have been using it for? You know, this email is turning out very differently from how I had originally intended to write it. I'm glad I checked Google Maps and then called some people I know about this. I feel like this story is brand new again now that I can see it from this new angle. I feel kinda shocked about it, all over again. And what kind of a former hippie am I to not have ever once in all those years suspected government involvement? It was the Nixon era and everything. Yet I just saw it as an encounter with a pack of natural dogmen. Now I wonder if there even is such a thing as a natural dogman. Like if I had a thermal imager when that thing came out of the woods, what would it have shown me? If I hadn't fainted or whatever happened, what would I have seen emerging from the woods in all directions around me? More dogmen? Or a human military unit investigating a breach of their perimeter? Even I don't know, and I was right there when it happened. And now I'm right here to tell you that the Dogman is very real in Ohio. A real what? I can't tell you, but there you go. And if I were you, I'd stay on the north side of those railroad tracks. Because just about the last thing you want to run into in the dead of night is the Windham Werewolf. We'd like to thank dear Valerie, the brightest in the gallery, sleeker than a mink stole. Please thank our EP Nicole. This episode would not exist without the kind donations and top-tier club membership of Valerie Gomez, aka Nicole Gomez, and so we thank her from the bottom of our hearts. She also leaves us very nice comments, and we're extremely happy to have her as one of our more prominent and encouraging viewers. We're here to explain how you can become as cool as Valerie Gomez, aka Nicole Gomez. Please welcome our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.